Also, the way that psychedelics are very helpful with depression is very interesting. And why is that the case? Depression, and I speak from experience because I've suffered myself from a long period of depression back in the early 90s. Depression is a very narrow, rigid frame of mind where you get locked into recurring patterns of thought and they're very negative, and you keep on repeating them to yourself, and you start hating yourself, and you just can't bear anything, and you're locked, and you can't escape from it. And what psychedelics seem to do is that they break that pattern. They just break it completely. And in this case, for depression, what seems to work best is a massive dose rather than microdosing. Microdosing is great as well.
You have to snap yourself out of it.
You've got to snap yourself out of it.
There's also, like, I think in depressive states, there's a narcissism wrapped into it.
Maybe so, yeah.
Not a narcissism in terms of, like, I'm the best, look at me, everything's about me, but in the negative side of that.
It's all about you still.
Yeah. And that constant negative thought. But taking and having a psychedelic experience will make you realize maybe how small you are in the grand scheme of things, or how you are intertwined into the fabric of humanity, so it can break out of that. Yeah, I like
ego
that.
death will disconnect you from the universe conspiring against you.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not that important.
And if you belong to a species that has been making the same kind of stone tool without any changes for more than 1 million years, two things are happening. Clearly, cultural information is being passed down, and clearly you're locked in a very narrow frame. And then suddenly it changes, and our ancestors start producing this extraordinary cave art, this amazing cave art. Whether you're talking about that site Serrania de la Lindosa in Colombia, or whether you're talking about Lascaux Cave in France, the art is stunning. And it is classically psychedelic art. It is featuring geometry, patterns of swirling dots, zigzag lines. There's Serrania de la Lindosa, and there's one of the extinct Ice Age megafauna with the arrow pointing at it up there. The geometry that's in there, the swirling dots, the sort of interlinked chains that are shown out there on the left. These are all classic psychedelic visions. Very often, as people enter a deeply altered state of consciousness, it starts with geometry and patterns, and then it manifests more into entities. And those entities are often therianthropic in form, Greek therion, wild beast, anthropos, man. They're part human, part animal in form. Not something that you see every day, but something that is
very common in
frequently common, very common in Egyptian art, and very, very common in deeply altered states of consciousness brought on by psychedelics, is the encounter with entities who then appear to communicate with us. And again, this is where the archaeologists roll their minds, because they like to think that consciousness is entirely local to the brain. It's all manufactured by the brain, and this is just our brain on drugs. Whereas in fact, the opposite seems to be true. The brain seems to be acting as a receiver for consciousness rather than as a manufacturer of consciousness.
What does that mean?
Well, what it means is that we have to function in a very tough physical universe. This is this world. We got to know the laws of physics, even if we don't know them, as written down in scientific textbooks. We got to know that if we bump into that wall, it's going to hurt. We got to understand all of that. And naturally, our main focus is on our physical survival in this physical realm. And what's useful for that is what is rightly called the alert, problem-solving state of consciousness. But there are many other states of consciousness that are available to us, and psychedelics unleash a completely different state of consciousness from the alert, problem-solving state of consciousness. And in that state of consciousness, we have these extraordinary experiences, and amongst those experiences, the most important are the encounters with entities that communicate with us. Now, we have a problem in trying to decide what is going on here. A very important project just underway at Imperial College in London, and another project that's going to be launched in Colorado, I think in Denver itself, within this year, where human volunteers, I hope to be one of them in Colorado. They turned me down in London because I've suffered from epilepsy since 2017. And there's no indication whatsoever that DMT would cause epilepsy, and I've smoked loads of DMT, and I know it doesn't cause epilepsy. Right. But understandably, having gone through all the legal hoops to get permission, they don't want me dying in their, in their lab. Yeah. So they've not accepted me as a volunteer, but I'm hoping I might get accepted as a volunteer here in America. What it is extended release DMT, DMTX. DMT is normally... Wow.
So it's just going to keep you high?
Keep you high for an hour, yeah.
Instead of, what is DMT, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
And how long does it feel when you're high for 5 minutes, 10 minutes on DMT?
Oh, when you're in the DMT space, it can feel like forever.
So an hour is almost horrifying.
Does time not exist?
Well, yes, this is what many of the volunteers say, is that it's an alarming prospect to be in that space for an hour. They're being delivered it by drip constantly directly into their bloodstream. They can signal at any time, I've had enough, if they're really feeling overwhelmed. Yeah. But by and large, most of the volunteers went through with it. I moderated a panel with four of the volunteers.
Anything interesting that they say about it?
And a gentleman called Andrew Gallimore, who's invented the technology that's going to be used in Colorado. Yes, the very interesting thing is that all appeared to be meeting essentially the same entities.
These are the gnome-looking things?
They might be machine elves, they might be gnomes, they might be therianthropes, but they're playful, they're tricksy, they're tricksters, and they convey knowledge. And they're also moral teachers. This is the funny thing. They make us confront our baggage.
How so?
Well, I can say in my case, I recently had an experience with the other kind of DMT, very recently, which is 5-MeO DMT. The DMT we're talking about is NN-DMT. Okay. And that is the one that most frequently produces entity encounters and the sense of telepathic communication with entities. And science is not in a position to write that off. Quantum physics is looking at the possibility of multiple dimensions, very open to that possibility. Maybe what's happening is that our consciousness is getting retuned by DMT to gain access to dimensions of reality that are normally close to us. We think reality is just this, but actually it's all this. Mm-hmm. And in a deeply altered state of consciousness, the need for the alert problem-solving mindset is damped down, and we can open up to other areas of reality. Who knows what's going on there? But the issue is, are people learning something new in this state? This would touch on the question of whether psychedelics were helpful in energizing an ancient civilization and getting it going. I would cite the very well-known case of Kerry Mullis, the polymerase chain reaction, PCR test, which has been fundamental for all DNA work subsequently. He admitted openly that he would never have made that discovery if he hadn't taken LSD. Wow. LSD gave him that discovery.